Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtottara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Dai Gauda Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nasupraya Shirabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 51, Vidura's talks with Maitreya. Oh yeah, 49, sorry. I was reading from the top of the page. Yeah, wait a minute. Yeah, sorry, I was on the wrong page. Yavat balim te janaharam kale Yatha vayam chanamadham yatra Yatho bhayeshyam ta imehi loka Balim haratonam adantya anuha Yavat balim te janaharam kale Yatha vayam chanamadham yatra Yatho vaishyam ta imenhi loka Balim harato nam adayanta anuha Yavat balim te janaharam kale Yatha vayam chanamadham yatra Yatho vayeshyam ta imehi loka Balim haratonam adhantya anuha. Vayam Chanamadama Yatra. Yadovayesham Taime Iloka. Okay, Kadimam Kali. Yadavayam Chanamadama Yatra. Yadovayesham Tahime Iloka. Palim Haranto Namadantya Nuha. Vaishnavis. Kali. Shantaime Hiloka. Tonamantyaha. Word for word. Yavat. As it may be. Balim. Offerings. Te. Your. Aja. O unborn one. Haram. Shall offer. Kale. At the right time. Yata. As much as. Vayam. We. Cha. Also. Ananam. I think it's anam. Food grains. Adanam. Adama. Thank you. Shall partake. Yatra. Whereupon. Yata. As much as. Ubayesyam. Both for you and for us. Te. All. Ime. These. He. Certainly. Lokaha. Living entities. Balim. Offerings. Harataha. While offering. Anam. Grains. Adanti. Eat. Anuhaha. Anuha. Without disturbances. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O unborn one, please enlighten us regarding the ways and means by which we can offer you all enjoyable grains and commodities, so that both we and all other living entities in this world. I'll start from the top. O unborn one, please enlighten us regarding the ways and means by which we can offer you all enjoyable grains and commodities, so that both we and all other living entities in this world can maintain ourselves without disturbance and can easily accumulate the necessities of life, both for you and for ourselves. Purport. Developed consciousness begins from the human form of life and further increases in the forms of the demigods living in the higher planets. Earth is situated almost in the middle of the universe, and the human form of life is the via medium between the life of the demigods and that of the demons. The planetary systems above the earth are especially meant for the higher intellectuals called demigods. They are called demigods because although their standard of life is far more advanced in culture, enjoyment, luxury, beauty, education, and duration of life, they are always fully God conscious. Such demigods are always ready to render service to the Supreme Lord because they are perfectly aware of the fact that every living entity is constitutionally an eternal subordinate servitor of the Lord. They also know that it is the Lord only who can maintain all living entities with all necessities of life. The Vedic hymns, Eko Bahunam Yovaridati Kaman ta enam abhruvam yatanam na prajanihi yasmin pratishta ana adame, etc. Confirm this truth. In Bhagavad Gita also the Lord is mentioned as Bhutabrit, or the maintainer of all living entities. The modern theory that starvation is due to an increase in population is not accepted by demigods or the devotees of the Lord. The devotees or demigods are fully aware that the Lord can maintain any number of living entities, provided they are conscious of how to eat. If they want to eat like ordinary animals who have no God consciousness, then they must live in starvation, poverty, and want, like the animals in the forest. The jungle animals are also maintained by the Lord with their respective foodstuffs, but they are not advanced in God consciousness. Similarly, human beings are provided with food grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk by the grace of the Lord. But it is the duty of the human beings to acknowledge the mercy of the Lord. As a matter of gratitude, they should feel obliged to the Lord for their supply of foodstuff, and they must first offer him food in sacrifice and then partake of the remnants. In Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that one who takes foodstuff after a performance of sacrifice eats real food for proper maintenance of the body and soul. But one who cooks for himself and does not perform any sacrifice eats only lumps of sin in the shape of foodstuffs. Such sinful eating can never make one happy or free from scarcity. Famine is not due to an increase in population, as less intelligent economists think. When human society is grateful to the Lord for all his gifts for the maintenance of the living entities, then there's certainly no scarcity or want in society. But when men are unaware of the intrinsic value of such gifts from the Lord, surely they are in want. A person who has no God consciousness may live in opulence for the time being due to his past virtuous acts. But if one forgets his relationship with the Lord, certainly he must await the stage of starvation by the law of the powerful material nature. One cannot escape the vigilance of the powerful material nature unless he leads a God-conscious or devotional life. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakoya Chakshurunminitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svam Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pashtyacha Shatarine Namo Mahavadannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauda Tvase Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesva Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarumbhisya Kripa Sindhu Evacha Padithanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namashrestra Manu Api Satiputram Mata Swarupam Rupam Tasya Grajam Urupariam Maturiam Gosvaratim Radha Kundam Girivaram Mahoradika Madhavam Samprapto Yasya Patita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosme Vagisha Yasha Varane Lakshmi Yasya Chavakshashi Yasya Ste Hridaye Samvit Tam Nishimham Aham Vaje. Hare Krishna. So in the Upanishads, there's mention of how living entities, whether one's in the human form of life, whether one's in an animal form of life, or whether one's in a demigod form of life, everyone is perceiving the Supreme in some shape or form. The Upanishads explain that the first level of realization that even animals can perceive is Annamaya. So it's the realization of this food tastes really nice, and this food is maintaining my body, so therefore I have to search after food. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita explains, Yeyatam mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. Manuvartante tams manusya partha sarvashaha. That all living entities are surrendering unto Krishna and all are following his path in all respects. So everyone is surrendering to the Supreme in some way, shape, or form. In the Annamaya stage, one is simply serving the needs of their belly, and the satisfaction they receive from that belly is a type of God realization that even animals can be experiencing. And then there's Pranamaya. Pranamaya means that one is aware that I'm living and that I need to maintain a shelter for myself, and I feel satisfied by having that shelter and being able to be aware of my own life, and to stay alive is very, very important to me. Sometimes you see birds, when they fly into the grass, they'll be eating, but simultaneously they're aware that anything could take their life at any moment. So this is pranamaya, a sense that my life is important. This is also an awareness of the Supreme. And then there's jnanamaya, which is one utilizes their mental facility for speculating on so many different things within the world. And all three of these, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, these are all material considerations. It means that one isn't necessarily fully aware of that Krishna is making one live, that Krishna is providing the grains, that Krishna is providing the ability to think. One isn't fully aware of that. But the Upanishads explains that once you go beyond Jnanamaya and you enter into the Vijnanamaya stage, one can develop an understanding that I'm actually categorically different from this material body. Bhumir apanalo vayu kaham manubura evacha hankara itiyame binam prakritirastata. That this material body is composed of different material elements. And who I am is categorically different from those material elements. Who I am is pure consciousness, Satchidananda. It says, the verse after that, Apareyam idastvanyam prakritim vidimeparam jiva bhuta mahabaho yoyidam dadate jagat. That beyond this inferior material energy of mine, there's a superior spiritual energy, which is actually illuminating the material body and allowing it to function to begin with. So in the Vijnana stage of life, one begins to understand that more important than just maintaining my body and soul together is actually giving nourishment to my soul and becoming aware of my categorical difference from this material body. And one begins to organize their life in order to facilitate that realization. And when one is engaging in a process in order to facilitate that realization, they go beyond the platform of just Vijnanamaya, where they see themselves and they see the material body. But then they come to a stage of Anandamaya, which is they realize that they're actually completely spiritual. That this material body is a sangohiyam purushaha, that we actually have nothing to do with it at all. It's a vehicle, and I'm simply a driver within the vehicle. And just as someone steps out of their vehicle after driving it, similarly, someone who's on the platform of Anandamaya, after stepping out of this material body, no longer enters into another material body because they've realized themselves in relationship with Krishna in full consciousness. They've realized Jiver Swarup Hoy Krishna Nityadas, that I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, and I can experience a varieties of different relationships as a friend, as a servant, as a parent, as a lover. And full realization of that consciousness facilitates one's not accepting a material body. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatpataha. Tvakvam deham punanjanma naiti mamiti sorjana. That one who understands my janma and karma, one who understands my janma and karma, they don't take birth again. So the Anandamaya stage requires that there's awareness of who Krishna is and who I am. So according to how one has developed their consciousness, it will determine the level of awareness that they have of the Supreme. Animals practically have no awareness of the Supreme, although they're realizing it on a subconscious level. Whereas completely perfected Siddha Mahatmas are existing in a perfect stage of consciousness constantly. Yoginam api sarvesam matgat tena taratmanaha shadavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamomataha. That existing in this state of consciousness, they're always aware of Krishna within themselves, and they're constantly worshiping Krishna. So we see that this state of consciousness, the living entity is no longer concerned with simply maintaining a material body, but rather they're being maintained by a completely different energy at this point. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritim asrataha. That they're no longer being maintained by food grains or water or air, but they're actually being maintained by the antaranga shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are being maintained by the divine internal potency of the Lord, and that's what's allowing them to push on in a material vehicle. It's not necessarily because they had a nice meal or because they drank enough water for the day or they had enough exercise, but it's actually because they're completely absorbed in their relationship with Krishna. And because of that full absorption, they are completely aloof from the needs of the body, and their livelihood isn't dependent on whether they get a proper meal. And we see this in the lives of great devotees in our Sampradaya. We see this in the life of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, who would go days and days without eating. And when he would eat, he would simply eat Ganga mud. And then we also see it in the life of one of Srila Prabhupada's own godbrothers, Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji. Srila Prabhupada had many godbrothers, but of all his godbrothers, the only one that's within the Veda base that Prabhupada actually points out as being a Paramahamsa was Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji. So when Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji first joined the Gaudiya Math, he was so inspired by the example of Haridas Thakur, who would also go days and days and nights without eating, that he himself took up this vrata of becoming fully absorbed in Nam Bhajan. And the residents of the Gaudiya Math didn't appreciate it very much. So they brought this matter to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And they told Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur he's simply chanting all day and doing kirtan all day, and he's not doing anything practical for the mission. He's not going out and collecting, he's not bringing any funds, and he's simply just living as a parasite within the ashram. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, very good, you should put an ad in the newspaper and said, anyone that can come and do this program will provide you food, will provide you room and board. Many people came, but Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji was the only one that could continue on. And there's a nice anecdote. One of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, when they were coming to Mayapur in 1976, they were meeting with Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji and recording his kirtans. So they had gone to the Chaitanya Math with Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, and they were about to record a kirtan, and Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji was going to find a mridanga. When he was about to leave to get a mridanga, this particular devotee asked him, Babaji Maharaj, can I have a glass of water? And he cuffed his bead bag underneath and he said, drink the holy name. So these are the pastimes of great personalities that are in full absorption of their relationship with Krishna. So for these souls, their gratitude for the Supreme is beyond just the platform of the material body and the needs of the material body. But for those who are on a lower level of consciousness, it's very essential that they engage in a regulated program of seeing how Krishna's hand is moving the ways and functions of their life. On the level of Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, one should be in full awareness that actually Krishna is the one that's providing these things. And for one who develops this recognition through the process of yajna, then there's a gradual elevation in consciousness. And this gradual elevation in consciousness is the whole point of the Krishna consciousness movement. So we cultivate a sense of gratitude by engaging in yajna. And that sense of gratitude ultimately brings us beyond the platform of just Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, but it actually brings us to the platform of Anandamaya. And that gratitude will be practically expressed through our service attitude in relationship to the yajna. Adhashri Krishna Namani Nabavet Grami Indriyai Sevan Mukhe Hi Jivado Swayam Eva Spratyado. That this Sevan Mukh, this disposition of service is completely essential in order for the living entity to actually have Krishna want to reveal himself. Atapite tevam param buddha dvaya prasadales anugreta evahi. That simply by having this service attitude, one can receive just a drop of mercy from Krishna. And through that one drop of mercy, Krishna will reveal himself. So the ultimate goal of yajna is to come to a state of purified consciousness. And what is that purified consciousness? The Bhagavad Gita explains, Anhanya cheta satatam yomam smarati nityasaha tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yogina. Which means that one's constantly remembering Krishna. And one doesn't need a system of rules and regulations in order to facilitate that remembrance of Krishna. One doesn't need to have a certain set of rules that I have to offer this amount at this particular time of the day. I have to offer this amount at this particular time of day. I have to chant this many mantras every day. But rather, one's entire life is spontaneously drawn to Krishna. One's mind naturally flows towards Krishna. In the conditioned state of life, the mind naturally flows towards Maya. And due to the mind constantly flowing towards Maya, one needs a program by which their consciousness can be reoriented towards Krishna. And that's what the process of sadhana bhakti is. It's to bring about an awareness of Krishna in our everyday life. But on the perfectional stage, one's consciousness doesn't need a process. One's consciousness doesn't need a program in order for themselves to be drawn towards Krishna. Rather, their consciousness is naturally drawn towards Krishna, as Queen Kunti explains in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Tvai me nanya visaya matir madhu pati sakrit ratim udva hata adha ganga vagham udhanvati. Queen Kunti is praying that, oh my Lord, please allow my attraction to be drawn to you in an unobstructed way, just as the Ganga constantly flows towards the ocean without being obstructed. The Ganga just keeps going and going and going, and there's no question of it being diverted at any moment. But it's very determined in its course of action. So similarly, one who's in a perfected state of consciousness, their mental absorption is unstoppable, swarasaki. So in this Kali Yuga, to facilitate this mental absorption, the process has been made very, very easy. Because the people in this age of Kali are considered to be manda. They're considered to be extremely unfortunate and lazy. And so in order to facilitate their mental absorption, the process of spiritual realization has been made very, very easily. And this process is the Sankirtan Yanga of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna Varnam Tvasa Krishna Sango Pangastra Parshadam Yagyar Sankirtanir Prayer Yajantihi Samedasaha. That Krishna, who is non-different from Rajendra Nandana in Vrindavan, has taken a golden complexion. And in this golden complexion, he is making the process of spiritual realization very easy through Sankirtan Yajna. And he doesn't appear alone, but rather he appears with his various weapons, associates, and companions in order to propagate this Sankirtan movement. And we see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Chaitanya Bhagavat that the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are so relishable for the heart that one can easily meditate upon them and be purified. In this meditation on the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, through proper hearing and proper chanting of these pastimes, will actually qualify one to begin to hear about the pastimes of Krishna and Vrindavan. Yatha yatha gora parada vinde videta bhaktim krita punya rasahi tato tato sarpati ritta kaksmat radhapatam bhoja siddhamba rasahi. That simply by developing this awareness that I am a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and simply meditating on that, acting on that, and giving that consciousness to everyone that we meet, one develops qualification for service in the land of Vrindavan. So this Krishna consciousness movement is not a movement that is simply meant to help people live a more sattvic life. It's not a movement that's simply meant to teach people how to be vegetarians. But it's actually meant to facilitate the full realizations of one's spiritual identity within the spiritual world. And so through the process of yajna, one's consciousness becomes purified. And through that purification of consciousness, one can begin to hear Krishna Katha. And what kind of Krishna Katha should they be hearing? Narottam Das Thakur says, anyone that hears the Katha of Gaura Lila, I applaud them and I say, bravo, congratulations. Because by hearing the Katha of Gaura Lila, one develops the qualification to enter in to the pastimes of Vrindavan, which is of the nature of Madhurya. It's completely sweet. It enchants the heart. And this is what's different from every other movement in the world compared to ours, is that many movements can teach you about God, but no movement can teach you about the sweet nature of God. And through serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and hearing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, through that process of Shravana Das, one moves on to Varana Das, where one begins to remember the pastimes. From there, one moves on to Smarana Varshana, where those pastimes are becoming easier and easier to remember. And then there's Anusmriti, where the pastimes are constantly flowing in the mind. And then there's Smarana Das, which is also known as Samadhi, where one's completely absorbed in the pastimes. When one's chanting the holy names of Krishna, there's no question of what's this devotee doing, what's this devotee doing, what am I planning tomorrow, what am I going to be doing today? But rather one is completely in the spiritual world with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha and Krishna. And when one perfects that state of Samadhi, then one enters into the platform of Sampati Das, or Sarup Siddhi, where one has full realization of the relationship with Krishna. So simply by serving this Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, hearing Krishna Katha regularly, and chanting the holy name with full attention, all perfection will come. Hare Krishna. So if 5 minutes, 6 minutes, if there's any questions or... Yes. Oh, you're waiting for the microphone. Okay.
Thank you for this wonderful class. The question is, if the demigods are fully God conscious, what holds them, anchor them still in the material world?
Oh, very good question. So as far as I understand, they still have a sense of controllership or proprietorship. So they may be God conscious, but there's a tendency into them to want to manage things and want it to feel like they're in control. This is actually shown in the pastime of Govardhan Puja in the Krishna book. So Indra is a demigod in heaven, and Krishna was living in Vrindavan with his family, and Nanda Maharaj was preparing for a big Indra Puja. And Krishna asked, Father, what is going on? And he said, oh, we're preparing for a big puja. And he said, Father, why? And he said, you're too young to understand these things. He says, between father and son, we shouldn't really keep secrets. So you should tell me what we're doing. So he began to explain that we have to worship Indra because he provides the rains, he provides nourishment to the crops. And because of that, we're able to feed our cows. And when the cows are fed, we're able to make our living. So these things were explained, and Krishna says, what is this? There's rain falling everywhere, even in the ocean, and they're not performing yajna there. Actually, Krishna was presenting a wrong philosophy in order to dissuade the residents of Vrindavan. But you can imagine he's just a 4-year-old little boy, 5-year-old little boy, and he's convincing all the residents of Vrindavan to give up this gigantic sacrifice. And he says, instead of worshiping Indra, we should just worship Govardhan, because Govardhan is providing so much for us. The grasses, waterfalls, fruits, vegetables, the cows graze there. Why do we need to do anything but worship Govardhan? So he convinced all the residents of Vrindavan to worship Govardhan. And Govardhan is actually non-different from him. So the residents began worshipping Govardhan with this big, big anakut. Anakut means like many preparations. Actually, every year during Govardhan Puja, we have a food mountain, and we worship that mountain, and then we distribute all the prasadam to everyone. So we offer tons and tons of sweets and foods to Govardhan, and in this pastime, Krishna actually became Govardhan, and he said, "Feed me." So all the residents of Vrindavan were feeding Govardhan. And then after this, Indra wasn't appreciated. He was like, who is this mischievous little boy causing so many problems? I'm feeling hungry. He's created some problems for me. So Indra sent his Samavartika cloud, which was actually the clouds for universal devastation, to be rained on Vrindavan. And it started raining so much. So Krishna called all the residents of Vrindavan. He lifted Govardhan Hill with his left pinky. Now, the left pinky is considered to be the weakest point of the body. But he lifted Govardhan Hill with his left pinky for 7 days straight, and all the residents of Vrindavan were held underneath. And Indra was completely bewildered. And then afterwards, he approached Krishna with Surabi, and then he bathed Krishna, performed an abhishek, and offered various prayers seeking apology. You can actually go to the place where that abhishek was performed. It's called Govindakund. And you can bathe there, sprinkle water, chant Hare Krishna there. It's a very nice place. So this pastime shows that Indra was puffed up with this conception of Ishamana, that I am the controller, I am the proprietor. So Krishna taught him a good lesson by displaying how actually he was supreme. So this mentality of Indra, that he's the controller, this is the consciousness which pollutes every living entity. And it even pollutes the demigods to a smaller degree. Those in the hellish planets, it's to a very large degree. Earthly planet to a lesser degree than the demons, but to a larger degree than the demigods. And the demigods, it's practically nihil, but it's still there. There's still a sense of proprietorship. There's still a sense of controllership. And you see various pastimes where demigods make mistakes. And these mistakes they make is due to having this polluted conception of being the controller. So that's why they're still existing in the material world. But Krishna recognizes that they're trustworthy to a certain degree. So he engages them in various services in order to maintain the material world. So I'll repeat it. He said in the purport it was mentioned that there's the demigods, the human beings, and the demons. And he's saying, why is it that the humans are situated in between? Whereas in the Bhagavatam we see that the demons are extremely powerful. Is that good? Okay. So my understanding is that it's kind of the same thing that I was explaining to Emil, that there's different gradations. And just because one may be existing in a more demoniac consciousness doesn't necessarily limit them from acquiring lots of power. You know, for instance, like you see like Sudama Brahmana. He was just living as a very simple Brahmana with practically nothing. He was skinny, he was invalid practically, and his wife begged him to please go, beg to Krishna. And when he got there, Krishna immediately bathed his feet and worshipped him, and he was considered completely glorious in the eyes of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so they enjoyed a very intimate relationship. But then you see Hiranyakashipu, he engaged in severe austerities and accumulated a lot of power, but how did Krishna reciprocate with him? He tore him to pieces. So it's not necessarily a matter of material opulences which determines which grade of life one is situated in, but rather it's a lessening of this ishamana, this idea that I'm the controller, I'm the proprietor. So when that consciousness is in a midway point between demons and demigods, one takes birth as a human. And that's why it said, labvasa durlabha idam bahu sambhavante, that the human form of life is extremely, extremely rare. Because in this state of consciousness, one isn't so envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that they can't engage in austerities in order to realize Krishna. And they're not so intoxicated by heavenly enjoyment that they will forget to do it altogether. But they're in a midway point where they can appreciate the supremacy of Krishna while simultaneously not becoming overwhelmed by the opulences that come with worshiping Krishna. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, and because you just like on book distribution, there's certain parts of town that we avoid going to. They may be born in like a materially unadvantageous position, but they're humble enough to appreciate what we're doing. There's pious people that avoid, engaging in a strict practice of sadhana bhakti. There's pious people that will have like a mixed conception of devotional life. So the demigods in heaven, they want to come down from that position so they can, be humbled a little bit and engage in a kind of devotional service where they can make substantial advancement. Archita Prabhu.
Very nice guys. Thank you very much. Just in regards to with regards to the last question about the demigods taking birth on earth, they don't bring like that all the time. Just in Kali Yuga, because as you mentioned, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was made the process so easily accessible that rather than living for millions of years in opulence and security in the level of demigods and actually being coming back down anyway, why not come right now, spend a life that's just a fraction of a moment by their calculation and go back to God? So they're very intelligent. It's not just some musical desire.
Yeah.
They understand if you stay on that level of demigod life, only very few can go beyond that. Most of them come back young, as Krishna says. After your pious credits run out, you take birth again one year. So why not come right away in Kali Yuga when it's easy to go? As far as I understand it,
Yeah.
it's not you pray like that after those few times of appearance, which is once in a day of Rama.
Yeah.
Every Kali Yuga, so when Lord Chaitanya comes, you pray like that because you know you take birth in this movement. And I've always said since day one being in our many people are living like you came definitely. You didn't come from the other side of me. Most of you came from living like that. You can see by how some of the boys they come and pick it up right away and just like zoom back to God. So that's the desire.
One point in relationship to this, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 11th canto BBT commentary, there's an elaborate discussion through a series of purports that the BBT has highlighted through the commentaries of the Acharyas, where they're talking about how the process of Nam Sankirtan is actually available in every yuga. It's not that it's not available, because we see Ajamil attained perfection through Nam Sankirtan, and he didn't take birth in Kali Yuga, he took birth in a different yuga altogether. So there's different prescriptions that are given in different yugas, but generally the atmosphere is so refined that someone isn't in a disposition where they can actually feelingly call out to Krishna. So they prefer to take up these more austere practices of living for thousands of years or engaging in yajna or deity worship. They prefer to engage in those processes. But the position of Kali Yuga is so degraded and the atmosphere is so materially unappealing that one can actually take full shelter of the holy name in this age. Whereas in other ages, although Nam Sankirtan is available, most people don't take shelter of it because the material atmosphere is somewhat attractive. So it's difficult to really get absorbed in Krishna, Krishna. Sachidinoy? Mm. Yeah. Mm. Hmm. 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 Thank you. Hare Krishna. Grantraya Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Mancha kalpatarum visya kripa sindhureva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.